Cool, excellent. So we shall begin. So welcome everyone. Good morning, afternoon, evening from wherever in the world you are. Very glad you are joining us today for this Cerbos webinar about the future-proofing fintech in the age of microservices and the cloud. So just by way to kick off, we'll go through a bit of an intro and go on to speak about kind of the future of fintech, touching particularly on like why authorization is kind of the number one security risk facing the industry today. And then we're very lucky to have Edgar joining us from 4G Capital, the CTO there. He's going to take us through kind of their journey and their transformation around bringing their stack up to meet their new requirements around authorization. So by way of introductions, quickly, I'm Alex Divier. I'm one of the co-founders and the chief product officer here at Cerbos. My background is software engineer, going into the world of product latterly, but always very much focusing on data and infrastructure side of things. And as I said, I'm very grateful to have Edgar joining us now. Edgar Rivera, who is the CTO of 4G Capital. Edgar, how are you doing today?
I'm fine. Thank you so much for inviting me, Alex. Thanks for letting me be here. I'm very excited. It's a great opportunity to tell us a story and, tell about what 4G Capital is doing. I'm a CTO. I've been working as an engineer as well for more than 24 years. Done a lot of in the financial industry, banking, payments, and other sectors. And being here CTO since nearly August last year in 4G Capital. And we are an amazing fintech in Africa. We operate mostly in Kenya and Uganda, and we do micro lending. We provide working capital to entrepreneurs, people with small businesses, people in the markets, and we're impacting a lot of businesses in Africa and Uganda.
Yeah, thank you again so much for joining us, and we're very lucky to count Edgar and the whole of 4G Capital as one of our partners here at Cerbos. And you guys have been a really kind of interesting journey over the last year or so as you've taken the helm around taking your infrastructure and really transforming it to a modern setup and really leveraging some of the great kind of tools and services that are now out there, which you've been very generous. You're going to kind of take us through actually some of your before, transitional, and future architecture diagrams, which hopefully will be kind of very, very interesting for those that have joined on the stream to hear about that. So just kind of kick it off, really leveraging your experience, Edgar, around fintech and both from that sort of engineering background, which is really where my heart is. I still write bad code to this day. Thankfully, it doesn't go into production. But now kind of looking more at sort of architectures and software stacks. Every day we get to speak to users of both Cerbos, but also kind of the wider ecosystem around their different architectures, the different platforms. And we have a big kind of tranche of users in the fintech space. So hence we really wanted to put this session together and really leverage kind of your experience. So kind of historically,
Sure.
what we see talk to these users is there's been this kind of nascent uptake of cloud, or kind of traditionally maybe a bit scared of using cloud in kind of the banking sector. As you as a very modern fintech, how are you going about sort of embracing these kind of new technologies, and really how does that kind of change what your priorities are over recent years?
Well, I think it's clear that now bank and fintech lives in the cloud. We see more and more digital natives born in the cloud, and then the traditional, I would say bank dinosaurs moving entirely into cloud and starting to operate in the cloud. And I think that the reason of that is because how quickly and how fast is the ecosystem. You see the constant changing priorities, where we got to deliver all the time value to the customers. Uh, I, I did a reflection a few years ago when I looked at one of these fintech applications in the App Store, and I saw how many times they delivered or they released the mobile application, and over a period of 6 months. And then I saw the same on a traditional bank, and it was like 5 against 35 releases. And this is the reason why as well things needs to be moving to the cloud. So fast delivery, fast time value to customers, and obviously scalability and all of those things that we already know that are happening on the cloud.
Yeah, and do you think what's driving that is kind of a demand from customers, or is that kind of a competition kind of in the fintech space, kind of what you're seeing, or is this just kind of a whole new paradigm in terms of how building applications?
I think the sector was pushed by the fintech, like, okay, so when we started to born digital natives, like banks that don't have branches, banks that don't have offices, uh, that completely changed the game. We see very successful banks in Europe, in America, as well in Asia, completely native, digital native, and they have millions of customers now. So, and that's one of the reasons they got to compete with the digital natives. Now, users they're already used to the same user experience that you know big brands or big tech brands give you. I'm talking about like the Googles, the Netflix. People is used to that user experience, and so you got to compete providing the same user experience and the fast value to the customer.
And so what does that really meant in terms of your priorities coming into fintech? You've worked with payments and numerous businesses before, but particularly coming into 4G. So what was kind of top of your mind in terms of things you really wanted to get in place so you could actually start delivering that end user value and that sort of customer demand?
Yeah, so for me, that was clear that if we wanted to, compete in the African market and lead that market, we gotta provide a best user experience and build quick solutions faster. So, when I arrived, I knew there were some things, some gaps that we gotta improve, things that we gotta make better in 40 Capital. And the direct consequence is how can we update our tech, or how can we change our tech to adapt to these new ways of working? What can we do to make sure that we're something secure, scalable, but also something that really provides that value to the customers? And that's it's simple, yeah. You got to adapt to that.
Yeah, and sort of how did that sort of influence your architecture? We were talking about this transformation going on. Sort of what
Yeah,
was the key things for you around sort of setup, sort of architecture decisions, the security you
yeah,
mentioned, making sure
yeah,
your compliance and regulatory needs are met. So how do you
yeah.
sort of approach that?
So the first thing for us was, okay, we gotta build something that we're able to change quickly, to test quickly, and we didn't have that capability before. We were not able to change policies, permissions that easy. And the other thing is that we gotta be able to as well be compliant, because compliance is such a very important thing in fintech, in banks that are regulated. Yeah, we're regulated by the Central Bank of Kenya. So you got to build something that is auditable, that is secure, that, something that also product people and business people and able to modify, change based on the changing requirements too. And then for us, when we say, okay, we don't have these capabilities, yeah, we're gonna need to make changes in our architecture to facilitate this to the product and to impact our customers and still being able to be compliant.
Mm. Yeah, so we kind of bumped each other a few months ago at a Google event in London, and we were kind of
Yeah,
very,
yeah,
very much both looking at sort of this sort of API first, the advantages like API gateway. What does that mean in terms of how you architect systems and composable architectures? We're going to talk about Cloud Run, for example, in a bit,
yeah,
and really kind of
yeah.
this microservice driven or API based strategies really kind of unlocks a lot and kind of breaks you away from these big monolithic systems.
Yeah, the other thing is when we met in Google Cloud, I remember AI, AI,
Oh
AI,
yeah.
AI was all around. Okay, but the problem is okay, but how do you do AI if you're not yet ready to do AI? So, and then you gotta start with a proper API strategy, an API management strategy that touches all your points. And I knew that we have to first build that capability in order to innovate after. And then, but okay, if you have some API layer, how do you ensure that that API layer is secure, and that API layer it's preventing, uh, fraud, or is
Mm.
preventing mistakes, or unauthorized access to certain features or certain capabilities. I mean, we gotta make sure that only the people that is approve, that is responsible or authorized to approve a loan are the ones that can only approve a loan. but that needs to be changed quickly if the requirements change too. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And this kind of authorization topic is what we're going to kind of frame the rest of the discussion upon. But just to make sure we're kind of all on the same page, just a bit of a kind of a background. So firstly, Cerbos, for those of you that joined us from kind of the fintech world that may not have heard of Cerbos before, but we're an open source project and a commercial product that enables you to implement fine-grained permissions for your application layer. So we have a big user base in kind of fintech where really, like I was saying, where there's who can make a loan decision, who's allowed to view an application, who's allowed to sign off a particular agreement. These are all kind of permission checks and authorization checks that every kind of system needs. And authorization is a topic that you could say is very much close to our heart. But really, if you look at the broader industry, this is not a new concept, but there are some new solutions to it. So if we go back all the way to 2021, I remember those dark days of the COVID times, as it were. The OWASP, the Open Worldwide Application Security Project, released their semi-biannual report around kind of the top security risks in web apps. And back then, in 2021, the number one issue that was identified through all the testing they do was around broken access control. And that was really kind of broken down into three buckets. There was the violation of least privileged access or basically denied by default. So there basically was a way to get into systems where you shouldn't have. Permitting to view or edit another account, which, in fintech, if you're looking at someone's finances or a loan agreement or someone's bank account, this is obviously things that need to be correct. And then being able to access APIs, we're talking about API strategy, making sure you have the right access controls for each method, for each call, for each HTTP verb, ultimately, as kind of the number one piece. And was also highlighted as number 9 on the list, was also around the security logging and monitoring for failures ultimately. So that audit log story. So being able to actually have a clean and consistent audit log for permissions. And just last year, they released kind of a minor update to this report and basically the exact same things being stated. So authorization is one of those key components when you do move to these more API-based strategies and architectures. It's one of the first things you sort of have to decouple out of your sort of monolith application or decouple yourselves from a banking backend, as we're going to go on about, into something that you can own and control and really is the gatekeeper to kind of every access and every part of your system. And it's something that sort of has to be right, particularly in kind of regulated industries, fintech being one of those, but we work with a lot of healthcare, insurtech, these kind of businesses where there's that strong regulatory requirement also. So talk about that. Let's go into really the juice of this presentation, which is really from Edgar about kind of this transformation journey you're going on, and you've been very generous sharing some of your architecture diagrams and such, which we're going to touch upon. But let's kind of begin really, what were your priorities around getting your system set up with the right level of authorization?
Sure. For us, it was very important to have capability to have full control or access, full control or full governance around access control. And that is special, because the problem is that, traditional fintech authorization models, they often rely on just one role, or something like, okay, you're manager, you're branch manager, and that's it. But there is this lack of flexibility when you need to do more complex financial operations or business logic. And the other problem is that most of the time is in the backend or in your backend. So the business logic is completely coupled to your systems. So that's one of the biggest problems. The second was, hey, look, this is a very fast-pacing and changing environment. You got to adapt to new compliance and business rules. So we see, regulations like, GDPR, CCPA or PSD2, and plus the internal business rules, because obviously product people comes with new requirements. We get always new requirements, new changes. Yeah. So then if you hard code the business logic inside your backend systems, then it's very painful and a slowly process to evolve them. Yeah. And then finally, it's all about how can you enhance the security and the auditability of your APIs, of your features. So if you have a centralized, okay, so the issue here is that in fintech, you gotta track and enforce who can access the data and when. And then if you don't do this correctly, that can potentially open unauthorized access. So we got these priorities for our business, which is we got to do this right. Okay. If you want to scale, if you want to go to other countries, if you want to grow your business, these things you need to nail these things. Yeah. Otherwise, you're gonna get trouble later in the future.
Yeah, are there any kind of like particular scenarios or kind of use cases that sort of come to mind where not having this sort of centralized authorization can lead to sort of security risks or things that you're trying to design around?
Yeah, exactly. So for example, for us, if I mean we try to do these things, yeah, but then we were falling on the traps, of hard coding these business logics in the code. Yeah, we fall in the trap of, adding something else to create an audit capability, building a new component to add an audit capability. And also every time we were collecting these requirements from the product, how you transform that or test that all of those scenarios are correct.
And sort of like how often were you getting these change requests and how long were they taking you to
Oh,
actually get
well,
rolled out?
so fine-grained access control is a constant thing because, uh, you know, first of all, we got users and employees coming and going and back, going and back. That's something that you should be able to manage very easily. Second, we see again the regulator coming with new requirements. Oh, by the way, you're not supposed to show the ID or the phone number. You should report this or that. So we get constant, changes as well. And then, but again, the other one is from product people, because products are, live things. They evolve, they grow quickly, and we change direction because we want to do this initiative and then another initiative, and it's a constant changing, and that's why you gotta have that flexibility. Otherwise, it's very hard to deliver quickly and to innovate.
Yeah, we hear this a lot. Like there's this constant sort of drumbeat of requirements coming from different parts of the business or regulators, particularly in like fintech space. And you're regulated by the Bank of Kenya at the moment, but I know you're scaling kind of out Africa, and that's just going to change the complexity of the kind of requirements you're going to have to meet. So,
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
right. You're right to see this coming.
And if you operate in different countries, different types of products, and now we have products that are also dealing with partners or third-party, companies, and then there are different things for these actors. Yeah, the rules are not the same.
Yeah, so really kind of that flexibility. So it's kind of take us through sort of your architecture. You've shared a couple of diagrams here. So you had this
Sure.
existing model that kind of didn't scale. Kind of take us through what that looked like, and we can put up the diagram as well.
Sure, you can put the next one. So basically, we started with simple Google identity and simple role-based access, and then at that point we have an API gateway in AWS, and we built Lambda as an authorization service that was basically acting as the man in the middle between the service layer, all of the other microservices and lambdas, and we also put some other rows at the Mambo or core banking layer. So in this case, basically all of the authorization was quite center or in the authorization service, and it was becoming a bottleneck because everything was passing through, and also we were getting that lack of flexibility when introducing complex business logic, because you have to implement that on the service layer based on the roles from Mambo and Google Identity. So then every change or everything that was impacting that area requires a new deployment and new changes, new testing, and new regression testing. So it's becoming very painful to make changes around that authorization side.
Yeah, just to kind of clarify here. So Mambu in this case is this banking platforms, sort of off the shelf, as it were, that you kind of that run the kind of the banking business, and then you were building service layers on top for interaction with different third parties or end customers and such.
Correct. Yeah, it's
And that's where you needed that more fine-grained controls.
yeah. So our service layer, or we built several microservices with Java, and we were at that point deploying as well as Lambdas. And then we were exposing APIs in API gateway for the mobile or web application, the different mobile web applications that we had. So Mambo, it's our core banking solution. That's where where you can process or create loans and add as a CRM as well. And it has some embedding security and role capabilities. But again, it's something that sometimes affect the service layer. Yeah, so you always have to as well load things from Mambu, in order to make some changes or decisions.
Mm-hmm. And so you really need to get that like next granularity. So what maybe one role in Mambu, you actually wanted to expose in a more fine-grained way to your end
Yeah,
users, and
especially
that's
when
kind of
you
where the challenge came.
yeah, especially when you had combinations of business logic. So okay, so if you are, let's say, branch manager, you are a loan officer, and so when this and that, then you can do this. So there is always complexity on the business logic, and you need to have that flexibility to adapt that business logic, because maybe the permissions or the business logic might be different for certain products. We had different financial products, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then we seen changes in requirements when we were trying to launch new products. Yeah, we said, oh, we're gonna do a new type of loan with this, the different partners or whatever. And we were saying, oh, but wait a minute, but this is different because now it's not through a loan officer or a branch manager. This is actually, oh, okay, wait a minute, now we gotta change this layer and do something else. Yeah. So there was a lot of flexibility.
Yeah, and this is kind of when we started speaking. So you were kind of working on this more future state architecture, let's say, that we'll come to, but you wanted to really get set up with a more fine-grained permission model today to kind of support these use cases you had around Mambu. And that's when we started working together around kind of getting set up, getting you onboarded with Cerbos to manage and define those more fine-grained permissions. And so you're kind of in this sort of transition phase now. You're going through this really kind of interesting cloud migration. You haven't. I'm sure you've had some sleepless nights recently to get that done, but I'm sure you're all on track. And so you kind of went through this transitional phase where well, talk us through it. You wanted to kind of take out this one authorization service, authentication sort of layer, and start moving to a more fine-grained approach.
Well, you can't do this on your own. You need to have a great team behind you and supporting you. Obviously, doing all of these transformations and migrations wouldn't be possible with, my team, the devs, the backend developers, the front end, the mobile developers, the product team, the IT ops, data people. There's a lot of people involved behind. So I'm just here representing them, okay?
Of course.
But in that transition architecture, because we were sometimes, it happens that everything happens at the same time. Yeah.
Cool.
So you say, okay, one of the challenges that we found was the scalability of our previous platform. Just that bottleneck authorizations layer, authorization lambda was killing us. Yeah. And we knew that we gotta have a different that would be more scalable under the cost control. And so I made a decision to migrate from AWS to GCP. And that also includes database migrations. Is a big project behind. We have a great partner supporting us on that. So it's okay. So because we are in that future architecture, we gotta do a transition architecture. So in this first stage, we keep the API gateway and the service layer, and this is where we introduce the Cerbos PDP and the Cerbos Hub, which is a great SaaS platform that you guys built that connects with your policies in GitHub. It was very easily for us build the policies in GitHub you can actually test the different scenarios and your policies directly on the Cerbos hub as well. And then we deploy a component, another Lambda on AWS that was acting as our authorization or policies layer, okay? And we keep using some of the Google Identity and Mambu roles, but now with more flexibility by making the policies outside the Java code.
Yeah, so just kind of replay that. Before you had kind of requests coming in, everything went through this centralized authentication, authorization sort of master service, and then they hit your service layer. And then you moved to this transition model where you got on board with Cerbos. So you took what before was all that hard-coded application Java code, took that out into Cerbos policies. Cerbos policies are just YAML files, which are very clear and obvious for defining your different resource types. So for example, you have a loan, there's an action of approve a loan, and these particular conditions must be met, and your service layer is essentially passing to Cerbos the input about who the user is and the particular resource, particular loan they're trying to access, and then Cerbos is then evaluating that the policies based upon that, and these policies are being evaluated inside this Lambda we can see here called Cerbos PDP. So rather than requests going through like a central authorization service then to the service layer, you're now in a model where the service layer is checking the decision point.
Yes, exactly. And this also integrates feedback from product team. So basically, we got a couple of workshops with the product team so they can understand, what is a policy, how can we build permissions and requirements for that? Because we got to get, product team input. But the nice thing about the policies is that they are human readable. So it's quite easy to see what they do. And also very easy to update them. There is a CI/CD, feature. When you update a new policy, it automatically can push the latest version to PDP, or the next time the PDP starts, it can download the latest version. So it's quite secure in terms of getting the last version.
Yeah, and just wanted to kind of call out here is because you are using Lambda, so serverless architecture is going to scale up and down with your application. It means at any point in time, you're going to have more than one probably instance of Cerbos ultimately running inside of your stack. So really keeping them in sync with what the latest policies are was a kind of a key requirement you came to us with, and that's ultimately what Cerbos Hub is doing here. It's that managed CI/CD pipeline, and then it's making sure that all the instances are running inside of both your Amazon infrastructure here, but also the future state one we're going to see in a second. So you actually had both Amazon and Google Cloud environments running connected to the same Cerbos Hub instance. So that way all your policies were centralized and distributed to both environments without you having to do any extra CI work or extra infrastructure work. Cerbos is kind of managing that for you.
Yeah, and also, well, I want to point to that it also took very few resources from us to do this. We have one engineer that actually nailed this, and he went through all of the documentation, and it was quite easy for him to create the policies, implement the changes on the back end. So it was quite straightforward, process for us.
Oh.
Now let's go to the future.
Yeah, absolutely. So your future state.
So in the future state, we want to get rid of AWS. I'm really sorry, Amazon, but we're moving completely to GCP. We're gonna have, RPG as an API gateway. And one of the features that I'm really excited about is Cloud Run as a serverless technology and Cloud Run multi-container. So we were able to migrate our AWS Lambdas to containers in Cloud Run. But Cloud Run has a capability to run two containers or two processes on the same container. I would say probably two processes on the same container. And that was exciting. I remember we were, drawing the solution on the cloud in a stand. And this is fantastic because here there is no latency. The container has the PDP next to, and it can access their policies in record time. So no single point of failure, because the containers scale up or down, and the PDP, the Cerbos PDP scales up and down as well. And you keep having the same Cerbos hub pulling the policies from GitHub. Nothing changed on that, which is fantastic. And we obviously keep using, some of the things we have in Google Identity and some of the, improvements we're doing at the core banking platform as well.
Yeah, so kind of the request flow we're looking at here, you have your end clients, they're hitting your Google Cloud environment, they're going through Apigee as kind of the API gateway, you're routing requests to one of numerous, I'm sure, cloud run services that you're running. And now each instance of the cloud run service has the application, so your Java application services running inside of it, as well as co-located inside of that pod, if you were to use the Kubernetes terminology, also has the instance of Cerbos running. So it really gives a, or hopefully is giving you that kind of that flexibility for when you're building new services, you don't have to worry about scaling the authorization piece as well, because it's co-located to your app. And as your app scales out and as you keep evolving your API strategy, your authorization.
And it's a very lightweight component. So it's a very lightweight component, it doesn't take that much RAM or CPU. Because I compare other solutions, and the issue that I have is that you have to go through a central, SaaS solution. So then it creates another point of failure, and it increases the latency. Having the policies on the same container and having capability to download the latest versions, it's crucial. I think I was very excited about these, and when Google releases multi-container capability on Cloud Run, because it opens a lot of possibilities. And then when I met you and we talk about this, I was like, wow, this would be amazing. So, and yeah, this is where we're heading right now. This is our future state.
Yeah, it's got very exciting and fortuitous that Google Cloud Run team launched multi-container, because it was always like this thing that was hanging around a beta, and then they released it next. So that was great to see, and great to see you kind of leveraging it as well, and fits really nicely.
And if you think about this, is something already supported in Kubernetes. So it was actually following this sidecar, pattern that was already popular in Kubernetes, but we didn't have that capability in serverless applications and serverless containers with Cloud Run. So pretty exciting and powerful feature.
Yeah, and then that coupled with like the stateless approach to Cerbos, so like you're saying, is very lightweight because it is not hitting some external database or hitting some external API. As your service layer needs to scale, Cerbos scales up with it. It has the policies loaded into it. There's no other infrastructure requirements or API calls or cloud access required. Hence, you get those super snappy response times with this particular architecture. And you're still kind of working then, your service layer is then talking back to your core banking platform. So just to kind of so that wraps up. So kind of the key improvements that when we were sort of discussing this talk that you saw, and there was a mixture of like time and cost savings, which is always, good for the bottom line, but also what that meant for your security posture and kind of how you build applications. How have you kind of seen that?
So, okay. So on one side, we were about to scale our existing platform to all branches in Kenya. And when we look at the performance of the Lambda authorization service Lambda, when we look at the cost of that existing, so we look, okay, we are having, let's say, 10 millions of requests per month, okay, as an example. And we look at the cost, then we project that into, okay, now let's increment this 10 times, because we're going to increment 10 times more users by expanding to all branches. We were scared. We would say, oh my God, this is going to cost us a lot of money. So by changing the authorization service and moving into that, allow us to save a lot of money in authorization. Now, the engineers have now the possibility to change policies in minutes, and they no longer need to deploy a microservice or write new tests, because they can test as well the policies directly from the hub, from the Cerbos hub. And then if product comes with the new requirements, like, oh, by the way, now branch managers are allowed to approve if so we are able to implement these changes much faster, or even for different products. So at the end of the day, in terms of advantages, or benefits, for us was being able to grant to the different roles, or like this granular access, to the different APIs, and also to define even attribute-based authorization policies, because you can also access to the different attributes, the HTTP attributes that comes as well on the header or even on the payloads. And having that capability so allow us to control resources and actions in a more granular way, and more in a better context, and based on the relationships of these APIs. That was the fine-grained access control issue was solved. Second, it's by decoupling, completely the authorization logic from the application code. So now we're able to modify policies much easier, much faster, and we can propagate those changes in services without requiring redeploys. And this is very important for the changing compliance and business rules, because if we for some reason we got a new requirement from the regulator, okay, so now we can implement those changes at the authorization layer easily. Okay, and then finally, all of the enhanced security and auditability. Now the Cerbos maintains like a central log where we can see all of the authorization decisions. So we got a clear audit for compliance and security investigations, and also by having policies, this reduces the risk of accidental grants or of access due to misconfigurations. And that is also very, very important for a fintech that is regulated.
Yeah, and that's kind of the common thing we sort of hear, that audit log is really the thing that, regulated businesses need much earlier. Other businesses potentially can wait a bit, but it's just a hard requirement from day one to kind of get that right. And, the cost saving piece as well. I think you gave us a number of like how much you're saving per year on kind of the infrastructure.
Just on the authorization service, more than 200K in authorization service, because that component, if we were to scale up that company, it will cost us a lot of money, like 20K per month. So it was a huge saving not going into that direction.
Yeah, that's always good to hear. And you always want to spend sensibly on your cloud infrastructure. So great, Edgar, just to wrap it up, firstly, thank you very much for your insight and willingness to share kind of some of the innards of how you kind of build your architecture. I would just, to end on sort of, to all those aspiring fintechs that are listening in or follow you on LinkedIn and Twitter and such, what would your advice be to them for kind of building a modern stack today? Like where would you tell them to begin?
Yeah, so hey, look, I'll say, implementing authentication was, a big thing some years ago, but now it's easy. And there is providers, there is easily solutions to provide authentication. But I think when you build authorization from the ground, you include these principles from the very beginning of your architecture, of your applications, then you're gonna guarantee a good scalability, and as well you're covering and avoiding risks by exposing things where you shouldn't. So I think it's important to analyze, okay, what's the cost of doing this now, but what is the cost of doing it later or changing it later? Yeah, or the effort as well. And when you look at this and how easily it was for us to implement Cerbos, it took one sprint to actually implement this, and we were able to decommission that service. So what was a clear winning for us. Now, obviously, we got the foundation set. Then from there, you're able to add more policies and keep adding the SDK supports Java, so it was very easy as well to to include that in the code. But now you're bulletproof. Yeah, hey, we did our work. Now we know we can scale and we can include more complex policies, and we can know that we're gonna grow in the right direction and with the right security as well. So I would say, do not overthink it. Do it from day one, because later it's going to be more painful.
Excellent. Very, very sage advice. So finally, thank you again very, very much, Edgar. Where can people reach you? Where can people follow you? Where can people get your insights?
Sure. Well, we are, as I say, we are in 4G-capital.com. We are really an amazing fintech that is transforming lives in Africa and is supporting people with working capital. I'm really inspired by the work that we're doing because it's not about getting people into debt. Now, it's about empowering entrepreneurs, people with the small businesses with working capital, and that is a transformational effect. We have stories of customers being with us years and doing repeated loans, and they know that they can count on us to grow their businesses. We have stories of people opening, restaurants, new restaurants, because they were able to use the capital to grow. So as well on LinkedIn, I'm always, in LinkedIn, try to be active, but I'm always open to have discussions around tech and see how can we do better fintechs, and better applications.
Excellent. And yeah, I can certainly vouch if you see Edgar appearing on agenda at a tech event in the EU, because I know you like your traveling, you like speaking, highly recommend go and see him, because you're a very engaging speaker and always has something very interesting to say.
Thank you.
So just to wrap up Cerbos as well, if you want to find out more about Cerbos and Cerbos Hub, you can go to cerbos.dev and find out there. We also run free architecture reviews and workshops. You'll get myself or one of the other team on a call, and we can actually go through your detailed requirements like we did with the 4G team as well, and kind of get you up and running with Cerbos. But we are, at the end of the day, an open source project, so best place to find us if you want to jump straight into the code is on github.com/Cerbos.
Cool.
So
any questions, Alex?
Now's your chance, please. If you have any questions, send them into that chat box below. I don't think we've got any pending at the moment. I think we tackled them sort of as we went. But please file them in there, and we'll follow up with you each individually as well if you have any other questions you want to ping us after the fact. So I will leave it there. Thank you very much, everyone. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day / evening.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Wherever you are.
And thank you, Alex, and thank you, Cerbos team.
Yeah, thank you very much, Edgar. Speak soon, and check out Cerbos.dev for more. Take care.
Take care, guys.